Is that the jury's verdict? Yes, it is. Listen, it has been 4 years since my parents were gunned down, and it has been 4 years of absolute misery. The Placer County District Attorney and the Sheriff's Department never stopped fighting. And today, at long last, we finally saw justice served. Well, don't celebrate just yet. Even though a jury found Daniel Serafini guilty back in July of 2025, this case is far from closed. As of this recording, his sentencing is on indefinite hold because his legal team filed a motion for a new trial alleging juror misconduct. Specifically, they claim the jury utilized computers to zoom in and tweak screenshots from the security feed, generating their own comparisons of the killer's footwear against Daniel's. Their argument is that by enhancing the video themselves, the jurors effectively manufactured new evidence that the defense never had an opportunity to dispute. Until a judge makes a ruling on this motion, Serafini's mandatory sentence of life without the possibility of parole cannot be handed down. Since he is ineligible for bail, he remains behind bars while this legal drama plays out. For Adrian Spoor, this legal limbo is one final slap in the face. After waiting years for an arrest and surviving a grueling trial, she now has to wait for a judge to decide if a few zoomed-in photos are grounds to restart the entire process. Tell us what you think down in the comments section. Did the jury go too far, or is the defense just desperate? Thanks for tuning in, and we will keep you posted the moment the judge rules on the request for a new trial. Robert Gary Spoor, known to friends as Gary, and his wife Wendy were the classic success story. Gary hailed from Imperial, California. Wendy grew up in the East Bay area. They crossed paths in college, starting a 50-year bond that was as much a business partnership as a romance. For 44 years, they hustled hard, and the rewards were huge. Over 2 decades, they amassed a property empire around Lake Tahoe, valued at nearly $23 million. They retired to a gorgeous waterfront estate in Homewood, where the view from the deck showcased the fruits of their labor. The couple had 2 daughters, Adrian and her big sister, Erin. It was through Erin that professional sports entered the family orbit. She married Dan Serafini, former big league pitcher. I went pro right out of high school when I was 18. I bounced between 13 clubs stateside before spending 4 seasons in Japan. It is basically every kid's fantasy. Back then, Serafini was a hot commodity. He came out of Junipero Serra, the same powerhouse Catholic school that produced icons like Tom Brady and Barry Bonds. Dan made headlines early on, pitching the only postseason no-hitter in the school's history. Taken in the first round in 1992, he was rated a top 100 prospect nationwide. He threw 94 miles an hour, though his aim was wild. Ultimately, his losses outnumbered his wins, and his ERA hovered above 6. After bouncing around the majors for 7 years, he finished up overseas. Finally, Dan retired from the game. He and Erin started a family with 2 kids, attempting to settle into a normal routine. Those grandchildren became the center of Gary and Wendy's universe. Living the good life with family nearby, the Spoors seemed set. But everything shattered on June 5th, 2021, the date their world ended. The family just sent me photos of 70-year-old Gary Spoor, found shot to death on Saturday. Beside him lay his wife, Wendy. Tony sources tell me the victim's wife was also targeted in the attack. She was struck by gunfire and hasn't woke up since the incident. Family members provided pictures of 70-year-old Gary Spoor, discovered dead Saturday from a single gunshot. His wife, Wendy, was found right next to him. Police are trying to ID a suspect captured on security cameras outside the residence. The footage depicts a masked individual in gray sweats and a hoodie sprinting across the yard with a bag. Officials confirmed there was no break-in. The house was not robbed. It is a baffling crime, especially since detectives are still hunting for a critical weapon. We know a bullet killed him. However, a sweep of the property turned up 0 firearms. The murder weapon is missing, raising major red flags. Around 10 that evening, a chilling emergency call came in. The woman on the line couldn't talk, only wheezing for breath. First responders arrived to find a gruesome scene. Gary died immediately from a head wound. Wendy took 2 bullets but managed to wake up just long enough to dial 911. A helicopter rushed her to a Reno hospital where she fought for survival and intensive care. Investigators found casings and bloodstains on the sofa. It appeared the victims were taken by surprise in their own living room. Strangely, nothing was broken or stolen, and the doors were unlocked. Security video told a dark story. A masked stranger walked up the path hours earlier. This wasn't a burglary, it was a targeted hit. Police hunted for a reason. They scrutinized financial logs for bad deals or angry associates, but found nothing. Detectives turned their gaze inward, focusing on the immediate family, specifically the daughters. With Wendy's memory gone and forensic evidence lacking, the trail vanished. For 8 months, there was no movement. Then in early 2022, Adrian tried to jumpstart the investigation. Adrian still recalls that phone call. I just hit the floor in shock. An intruder had gunned down both her folks. I've never felt such despair or wept that much. Her father, Gary, was gone. He was a loving man who adored us. Her mother, Wendy, survived with fragments still in her brain. Even 8 months later, she is still learning how to walk again. She had to be taught how to eat and process thoughts. Some parts of her are gone forever. We are approaching what should have been Dad's 71st birthday. We need to know who did this. The family's offering $150,000 for leads. Ideally, the money will convince someone with knowledge to speak up. Tragically, Wendy couldn't hold on. Crushed by the injury and grief, she killed herself a month later. She died, never knowing who attacked them. The case seemed dead, but a feud was brewing between the sisters. On June 5th, 2023, 2 years post-murder, Adrian launched a bombshell civil suit. Marking the anniversary, she sued for wrongful death, alleging her sister Erin and brother-in-law Dan orchestrated the hit. While mysteries remain about Gary's death, his daughter Erin is now under the microscope. She also raised serious doubts about the part her sister Adrian played in the events preceding their mother's passing. In court papers filed that August, she charged Adrian with elder abuse, claiming she took advantage of Wendy Wood's fragile state. The theory was that Adrian walled Wendy off from everyone else to pull off a scheme to funnel the entire family fortune into her own pockets. The complaint alleges she used psychological pressure to kick Erin to the curb and seize control of their parents' estate, a fortune worth upwards of $10 million. Adrian didn't hold anything back. She openly accused her sister Erin and brother-in-law Daniel of hatching a plot to murder their parents just to get their hands on the inheritance. The suit argued the Serafinis were buried under a mountain of debt and that Erin tricked her parents into leaving the house that day to clear the deck for Daniel to execute them. Erin hit back with a countersuit of her own, charging Adrian with elder abuse and insisting her younger sister played mind games with their dying mother to scratch Erin from the will. As the sisters waged war in civil court, homicide detectives were quietly tightening the noose around their prime suspect. 4 months after those papers hit the docket, police revealed they had apprehended 2 suspects for killing Gary Spoor and trying to end the life of Wendy Wood. A retired Major League Baseball player is in handcuffs, charged with gunning down his own father-in-law. The violence unfolded at the family estate in Homewood along the western edge of Lake Tahoe. The sheriff's department has now confirmed the suspect is none other than the couple's son-in-law, retired big league pitcher Daniel Serafini. To understand Daniel Serafini's slide from the big league mound to a county jail cell, you have to examine the sheer depth of his collapse. He didn't leave the game to thunderous applause. He faded out quietly. Back in 2007, his major league run was abruptly halted after he popped hot for performance-enhancing drugs. Daniel fought the allegations until the very end. I got completely screwed over by Major League Baseball. He told reporters, my kids see things in the news. It was total garbage. I've basically been blacklisted. Once his playing days were over, he took a swing at the business world. He launched a training facility, a horse farm run by Erin, and a watering hole in Sparks, Nevada. But Daniel had a better arm than he had a head for numbers. Terrible deals and a brutal split from his first wife left him flat broke. By 2015, he was $300,000 in the red. Things got so desperate he grabbed at a reality TV lifeline, starring on bar rescue in a last-ditch effort to salvage a sinking company. In the end, the Serafinis offloaded the bar not even a year later, but their outstanding debts gobbled up every cent of the profit. Just to keep their heads above water, the couple had to rely heavily on Erin's folks. Legal filings reveal that Gary and Wendy were funding their entire lifestyle, covering the Reno mortgage, child care, tuition, trips, and even a $55,000 vehicle for Daniel. Yet all those checks couldn't repair the wreck of Daniel's life. After blowing through millions, the one-time pro athlete was humbled, working manual labor at a Nevada gold mine. The days of living in a mansion were long gone. He was bunking in a trailer right on the work site. Detectives say the shame ate him alive, and he was boiling with rage toward the in-laws he was forced to rely on. Authorities believe that pressure cooker finally blew its lid. And exactly as Adrian Spoor had predicted in her legal papers, Daniel was now behind bars, facing a murder charge. But he didn't go down by himself. Moments later, officials revealed they had a second suspect in handcuffs linked to that Lake Tahoe homicide from 2 years prior. Samantha Scott touched down in Placer County this afternoon, shown here being walked from a sheriff's aircraft into the back of a patrol unit. Scott and retired ballplayer Daniel Serafini are both locked up regarding the slaying of Robert Spoor and the attempt on his wife Wendy Wood's life. As for Serafini, he's scheduled to face a judge on November 27th. Scott, meanwhile, has been processed at the Auburn Detention Center and is slated for arraignment on Monday, November 6th. 34-year-old Samantha Scott wasn't just some random partner in crime. She connected with the Serafinis at Aaron's Horse Ranch, starting out as just another client signing up for riding lessons. But that friendship escalated quickly. Before long, she was tagging along on family trips and eventually moved right into their home as the live-in nanny. It turns out she was also the loose thread that unraveled the whole thing. While the trail looked cold to the public, detectives cracked the case by uncovering a massive slip-up. Daniel was smart enough to power down his device during the murder window, suspicious on its own for a guy who usually fired off hundreds of texts a day, but Samantha Scott, she left hers right on. Police tracked her signal pinging off towers all the way from Nevada to a meeting spot near the Spoor residence in Lake Tahoe at the precise moment of the killing. Those digital breadcrumbs blew the case wide open. Security cameras caught the hooded figure trekking from the crime scene to the pickup spot, where video shows the vehicle swooping in to whisk him back to Nevada. When police first grilled Samantha, she admitted she was in the car, but claimed she was clueless about any murder plot. She told investigators she thought Daniel was heading up to Lake Tahoe to score a massive load of cocaine and that she was just along for the ride. Daniel and Samantha both entered not guilty pleas, and the judge ordered them held without bail. After the arraignment wrapped up, Adrian Spoor fielded questions from the press. First off, what is your take on the not guilty plea and the judge's ruling to deny bail? The judge made the right call. Samantha Scott doesn't belong out in the community, and I believe the truth is going to come out. I'm convinced Samantha Scott is guilty. Why did you feel it was so crucial to show up today and make a statement honoring your parents? I was worried Samantha Scott might actually get bail, and I felt I needed to address her directly. She played such a horrific part in this, and I wanted to look her right in the eye and confront her for it. Can you share what you said in your victim impact statement? You mentioned a family vacation you all took and that Samantha was there afterwards. Could you elaborate on that? Yeah, Samantha Scott is a twisted individual. She's been my sister's best friend for a long time, and even after the shooting, she kept inserting herself into our family, hanging around my mom while she was trying to recover in rehab. I mean, the kind of sickness it takes to look your victim in the face and watch them struggle, it's just beyond comprehension. It is completely heartbreaking. She actually stuck around coming over with my sister to see my mom fight for her life, and it was just sickening, absolutely sickening. What went through your head standing in that room, looking at her for the first time since they took her in? It felt like justice is finally happening. My gratitude for this region knows no bounds. The Placer County Sheriff and the DA never gave up on us. For 2 long years, they put in a massive amount of effort. None of this has been simple, but staring her down and realizing she will finally answer for her actions creates a feeling that means everything to me. It signifies that I could sense my parents right there with me, calming those jitters you get before talking, almost telling me to lock eyes with her because she is going down for this. What is your theory on why they went through with it? I believe the truth is going to surface eventually. I am not going to guess right now. I definitely have my own theories, but I truly believe the facts will be revealed soon enough. How did you handle the news about Dan Serafini getting busted, and how did you guys get along? I was never really a fan of Dan. Well, as the legal filings are going to demonstrate, it did not exactly catch me off guard. My opinion is that he is simply a terrible human being. I honestly regret the day he ever crossed paths with my sister. It kills me that they are currently still husband and wife. My view is that he has a violent streak. He is driven by greed. I am incredibly grateful Placer County put him behind bars because that is exactly where he belongs. Inside her civil filing, Adrian claimed that Daniel was driven by money to murder her folks. She went on to assert that Aaron baited her parents to leave that afternoon so Daniel could sneak inside unseen. But detectives turned up zero proof backing the theory that Aaron left an entry point open on purpose. Law enforcement looked into Aaron Serafini but never filed any criminal charges against her. Rather than that, the state zeroed in on the pair they could physically locate at the crime scene, Daniel Serafini and Samantha Scott. Once the suspect list was whittled down to a pair, detectives just needed one of them to crack. The wait turned out to be pretty short. Samantha Scott sat rotting in a jail cell for 15 months after the bust. Once the heavy reality of spending her life behind bars hit home, her loyalty to Daniel crumbled for the sake of self-preservation. When January 2025 rolled around, she was prepared to make a trade. She met with the prosecution team for what is known as a Queen for a Day session. Essentially, this is a shielded conversation where she could spill the beans without worrying about her statement hurting her at trial. Feeling secure, she unleashed the shocking truth that justified her devotion. She and Daniel were entangled in a heavy romantic and physical affair. She confessed that this connection was the engine driving years of deception. A few weeks down the road, Samantha copped a plea for accessory after the fact, and for that, the government tossed out the heavier homicide and breaking and entering counts. She is currently looking at a prison term ranging from 16 months up to 3 years. Once the hearing wrapped up, they cut her loose with a GPS tracker, abandoning Daniel to confront the jury all by himself. At the time this video went live, there was no date on the calendar for her final sentencing. The People versus Daniel Serafini kicked off on May 19th, 2025. Every seat was taken, showing just how huge this case was, with an ex-pro ball player standing accused of slaughtering his rich relatives. The state described a guy embarrassed by his own flop of a life, stuck in a mobile home while resenting the very person covering his expenses. They made the case that this act was far from a heat-of-the-moment snap. It was purely a business deal. In Daniel's eyes, Gary Spoor held a higher value in a casket than he did walking around. The lawyers honed in on a vicious dispute regarding a home remodel, tagging it as the root cause of the animosity. They claimed that even though Gary signed the checks, he micromanaged every single cent. That toxic situation where Daniel was desperate for the money but loathed the supervision is exactly what shoved him past the point of no return. Backing up this narrative, the state revealed a string of volatile texts written by Daniel that showcased his mounting hatred for Gary. The battle had been raging for a solid decade. About a year after the wedding, he wrote that he would shell out $20,000 to put a hit on him. He mentioned it repeatedly. In 2016, he said he loathed them, calling them rich trash. Then to Eric Bunner in March of 2021, just 3 months before the murders, he explicitly stated he was going to end them one day. This went far beyond just venting behind a screen. The feelings were genuine, and he would openly tell folks about it, actually utilizing the specific word kill. Do folks talk like that? Sure, sometimes. However, looking at this specific situation, there comes a time when words have to carry weight. On top of the text, they showed proof that less than an hour before the shooting, Wendy Wood had given Aaron a check for $90,000. The state underscored the sick fact that Daniel gunned down his family members under 60 minutes after they made a huge financial gift to help his household. Lacking DNA or a firearm, the case hinged on analyzing surveillance footage. A specialist told the jury the masked shooter had a distinct limp, a physical match to Daniel's walk stemming from his past pitching damage. Regarding the tool used to kill, although they never recovered it, the shell casings found there corresponded to the specific model of firearm Daniel was known to possess. The story Samantha Scott told on the stand was absolutely crushing. She confessed to being the wheelman and painted a terrifying picture of the drive back. Daniel was riding shotgun, systematically dismantling the pistol. She listened to metallic clicks she knew from watching movies, then observed him tossing the parts, a PVC tube, and his outfit out the window and onto the freeway. She also let slip that Daniel was not just hoping to get lucky with an entrance. He explicitly told her the rear door was going to be open. The prosecution wasn't done putting the squeeze on the women in Daniel's life, and when his wife Erin took the stand, she dropped some major bombshells. Michelle, you sat through Erin Spore's testimony today where she opened up about the dynamic between her husband and his ex-mistress. What exactly did she tell the court? Well, Erin Spore didn't hold back, telling the jury flat out that she and her husband, Daniel Serafini, have always had an open marriage arrangement. She also mentioned realizing at some point that Serafini started off just being friends with Samantha Scott, his former lover and co-defendant in this trial. But eventually, that friendship crossed the line and turned into a full-blown sexual affair. She claims she was totally in the dark about the emotional depth of it, though only realizing they were in love after seeing news reports about Samantha Scott's testimony in this murder trial. Cameras aren't allowed inside the courtroom, obviously, but take a look at this footage we got outside. Here's Erin Spore pulling up to the Auburn courthouse today, where she testified on a range of topics, from those tangled relationships we just discussed to her rocky history with her parents. She admitted she fought constantly with her folks, noting that her mother had financially cut her off at least 30 times since she turned 18. Regarding the day of the shooting, Spore testified they had plans to spend June 5th, 2021, boating on Lake Tahoe with her parents and the kids. She noted her husband was typically welcome at the in-laws' place, but on this particular day, he wasn't part of the original itinerary. That was the day of the attack. Now Spore says she knew the schedule, that he was aware of the visit, and she couldn't say if anyone else was inside the house after they returned from the lake. The group just headed back to the house to relax and grab some dinner together. The prosecution's theory is that Serafini sneaked into the house while everyone was out on the water, lying in wait to ambush his in-laws once his wife and kids had cleared out. Spore also confirmed she has immunity, meaning nothing she says can be used against her legally, and since she's still married to Serafini, she'll be back on the stand when court resumes Thursday. She remains under direct examination, unpacking a massive amount of information for the jury to digest.
Reporting live from Auburn, I'm Michelle Bandura for KCRA 3 News. So, Michelle, prosecutors pressed her about wanting to split from Serafini a few years into the marriage.
And what is the deal with this postnuptial agreement we keep hearing about? That's right, Curtis. The DA grilled her about considering a divorce back around 2015. They tied the knot in 2011, and she admitted, yeah, the thought crossed her mind, adding, who doesn't think about that after being with someone for that long? She insisted, however, that her parents never pressured her to actually go through with a divorce. Then she brought up how her mom, Wendy Wood, wanted Serafini to sign a postnup ensuring he wouldn't get a dime of their estate, which is valued at roughly $23 million. But the prosecutor whipped out another document showing Serafini is entitled to about 100,000 shares of a Washington corporation they own, provided he stays married to Erin Spore. There is just a whole lot of complexity for the jury to sort through here. During opening statements, the state argued that toxic family drama and greed were the driving forces behind the crime, but Erin Spore claims things weren't as dire as they sound. Throughout the trial, thousands of emails were introduced showing some pretty nasty fights within the family over finances, business dealings, and even how the kids were being raised. Erin Spore maintained that these arguments never got physical, that the family always reconciled eventually, and she didn't believe any of it was motive enough for Daniel to kill anyone. Spore testified she actually supported Daniel's idea to write a book to help pay legal bills, saying she even reached out to publishers and that the story would focus on his baseball career leading up to the events of 2021. She also testified that she believes Samantha Scott has been totally deceptive, specifically when telling the court that Daniel confessed to her that he shot his mother-in-law, Wendy Wood, who died roughly 2 years after the fact. Spore mentioned Scott was a close buddy right up until the arrest, though they don't talk anymore. And things got weird in court today when both sides asked Erin about Scott's fashion choices and look since getting out of jail, the defense team displayed a series of recent media photos in court today, pointing out that recent images of Scott's hairstyle and clothing really mimicked the style Aaron Spoor had when she was photographed during a prior preliminary hearing. Aaron Spoor confirmed she told an investigator she thinks Scott is trying to morph into her, describing the whole behavior as downright creepy. The defense's whole game plan hinged on reasonable doubt, hammering home that despite a huge, long-running investigation, no DNA, fingerprints, or murder weapon ever linked Daniel to the scene. Attorney David Dratman went after the financial motive theory using what he called the Golden Goose defense. He posed a simple question to the jury. Why on earth would a guy drowning in debt kill the very people who were paying his bills? It just didn't make sense.
The defense also argued that the masked intruder caught on video looked smaller than the former pitcher, reminding jurors that Aaron herself testified the man in the footage was definitely not her husband.
Finally, they urged the jury to completely disregard Samantha's testimony, painting her as a liar who threw Daniel under the bus just to save her own neck. Closing arguments finally wrapped up on Thursday, July 10th. One side painted Daniel Serafini as a cold-blooded executioner, while the other insisted there wasn't enough hard evidence to convict, leaving Daniel in the bottom of the ninth with everything on the line. Because of the special circumstances attached to the murder charge, specifically the line and weight allegation, he was looking at life in prison without the possibility of parole. The jury spent 2.5 days locked away, dissecting that surveillance footage frame by frame, until Monday, July 14th, when the room fell dead silent as the bailiff handed the verdict form to the judge. All right, the verdict for count one, people of the state of California, plaintiff versus Daniel Joseph Serafini, the defendant. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Daniel Joseph Serafini, guilty of a violation of California Penal Code Section 187. A murder, a felony is charged in count one of the third amended information. We also determined the charge to be murder in the first degree, which has been signed and dated by the jury foreman.